Thank you, Michelle. Right, I think, are we good to go, Sanu? Great, awesome, fantastic. Okay, so hi everyone again. My name is Gopika. I work with AWID, the Association for Women's Rights in Development. I am based in Bangalore in India, so it's very nice to see a nice group of people, nice and intimate. At least we'll have a good chance for some good discussion. So I'm really looking forward to it. And yeah, while we don't have a chance for everyone to introduce themselves, feel free to drop in your name, where you are dialing in from, which organization you're working for in the chat. We'd be really excited to know from where all we have people joining us today. So as you all know, we are going to be talking today about a global tribunal for women workers. I'm not going to say much about it because we have 4 incredible speakers who will share with us from their different perspectives, all the information, reflections, and really what is the importance of this tribunal and what is the impact that it could make in the lives of women, trans, non-binary, and gender non-conforming workers in a range of sectors. So without actually, delaying this discussion much further, I'm actually going to invite our first 2 speakers from ERA, Asia Pacific, to discuss a couple of questions today. So I'd like to invite Shanti and Praveen from ERA Asia Pacific, who are the lead organizers of the Global Tribunal on Women Workers. Welcome, Shanti and Praveen. So excited to have you join us today. And as someone who's joining this discussion for the first time, could you tell us a bit more about why you are co-creating this space in this political moment? And what do you hope workers and feminist labor movements get from this? And if you could also go into a little bit of detail into what are the different ways in which folks can participate in the tribunal now, which is, we're already in July, but also during its proceedings in September when it's scheduled. So would love to hear more details from you. So over to you, Shanti and Praveen.
Thank you, Gopika, and thanks, AWID for inviting us. So what I will do is I will very briefly talk about your first question, why tribunal, and why at this point in this political movement, how feminist and labor rights groups are going to kind of, what they will get out of it. So that will be my response. And my colleague Praveen will try to shed some light on the process related thing. And for those who are interested, how they can participate in the process. So that is how we are going to divide the question. I think the first part, why we are co-creating this space is because we thought something like this is needed, looking into the kind of context and the reality that we are facing. So it's not just the kind of present context that we are facing because of COVID. There are like the situations that we have been witnessing. There are long-standing unresolved human rights issues and labor rights issues, the violation happening in different sectors. And on top of that, we are also witnessing like emerging issues related to informalization, related to kind of gig economy and digital economy. We don't know whether our systems, like the established system, the formal system, is yet ready to kind of address the problems that we are going to face, or the problems that we are going to, experience in these new sectors, in new areas. There are like issues, if we have to just pay attention to the, if we just look at the gender wage gap, the Equal Remuneration Convention was introduced by ILO in 1950s, and we are still struggling for the gender wage gap. Inequality is still there. So, all these different structural issues have not been addressed, we thought like something like tribunal will be needed for us to kind of get attention. And the way tribunals have been used as a political tool by different social justice movement, at least we were able to understand whether they kind of addressed all those problems, the demands or not. But we were at least able to understand the demands of those people, of people who organized those tribunals. So it was kind of, we have seen the effectiveness of these different tribunals, whether it is the Global Tribunal organized by Center for Women's Global Leadership, which kind of helped us to kind of consolidate demands in relation to gender-based violence and violence against women. But recently, the Malaysian Tribunal, which brought together different civil societies and to understand the demands and rights violation faced by women in different sectors. So those were kind of our, the starting point and the places from where we were getting ideas and influence. The idea was there a few years ago. And with the COVID, we thought this is the right moment for us to organize it, because with COVID, we saw different kind of challenges faced by workers. And it also kind of revealed like the systemic gaps, the gaps in our existing system, whether it is at the national level, whether it is our legal frameworks, or whether it is the international human rights system. All these established system of justice were not able to protect the rights of workers, women workers. And we live, the reality is like, we don't even have like, we don't even consider many work that women are doing as work. So it's kind of very different when you are expecting the system to respond to the problems faced by those workers who are not even considered as workers by their system, by their legal framework. So, so it is our, in that sense, this tribunal is our kind of the demand as well as to kind of to connect different movements. What you said, like what like a feminist and labor rights movement can expect, or what they will get out of it. It's mainly about like connecting the struggle. We know there are demands are quite common in different sectors, in different movements. So connecting the struggle, building solidarity, but we are also expecting some very specific outcomes from the processes, such as documentation of violation, and specific, coming up with specific, very nuanced, context-specific recommendations targeted to the duty bearers. And also to kind of, as I said, highlighting the gaps in the system, existing system. It's not something, the demands are not going to be different from this tribunal. It's the difference is the process and the scale and the process is going to be different. And just to inform everyone, currently we have more than 20 organizations joining us from different regions of, in Global South, representing different sectors, various sectors yeah, so that's why we are really kind of hopeful and excited, and we are hoping that at least some of the demands of the women in relation to labor rights, women's rights will be addressed through this process. So now I will hand it over to my colleague Praveen to speak about the process a little bit and how different groups who are interested can participate.
Thank you so much, Shanti, for that overview. So I'm here to answer Gopika's second question, which is the different ways folks and people can participate in the tribunal. Just give me 1 quick minute to share my screen, if it's possible. Yeah, sorry, I forgot to mention that earlier. I just have a few visual aids. All right, perfect. Okay, so just to provide a bit of context into the technical, practical working bit of the Global Tribunal. So the Global Tribunal Women Workers will be held during the Global South Women's Forum 2022, which is also known as GSWF. So GSWF has been a space, a forum space of sorts, hosted by ERO for years. And over the past 2 years, we have moved it to a virtual iteration for obvious reasons over the pandemic. So the main driving force behind GSWF is empowering and welcoming a diverse variety of organizations, individuals, activists, artists, both local, regional, and even international, and also community-led, to come and lead their own dialogues, to organize and host their own spaces, to bring the stories of their lived realities in line with yearly themes. So the theme for this year's GSWF is Women in Work. Last year, it was environmental justice for us. So we hope to keep that spirit and the vibe and the energy of creative and artistic sessions, because advocacy and activism across all sectors, across all movements, is not a monolith. It is diverse, it's creative, it's vibrant, and we want to keep them in. So that's why we envision the Global Tribunal and GSWF working somewhat simultaneously and concurrently, just to give it a bit of jolt to, and a bit of excitement and a bit of color. So that is just the overview, just to put a bit of context into what I'm going to go into, the more technical information. So that is what we are hoping to have with GSWF. So of course, the tribunal will feature testimonies from witnesses, but we also hope, and we're also working towards engaging CSO-led discussions and reflections, as well as artistic and creative sessions. All right, I'm trying to go next on my, all right, perfect. So this is a brief example of what the Global Tribunal will look like practically, like a day of the Global Tribunal. So of course, the first thing we start off is with testimonies. So these are testimonies from witnesses about the different issues and the thematic areas that we have. And then we have a CSO-led discussion to just reflect and discuss the theme and the issues, the different issues that emerge from the testimonies, and just to have a space for them to discuss this. And then we have a creative corner, which is what we call our artistic sessions. So these are the 3 different components that will constitute a day during the proceedings. So going to my answer to the question, how are the different ways folks can participate in the Global Tribunal at this point in time, as well as during the proceedings in September 2022. So for now, one of the most important things that we are doing, and it's already underway, is the crowdsourcing of witnesses and witness testimonies from your respective constituencies. And I did put a little note that it is time sensitive, because we have the time period about a month and a half to collect these testimonies, and we are now about 1.5 weeks into the process already. But we are still inviting organizations who want to join us in this endeavor and would want to conduct outreach for these testimonies. But as I mentioned, it is a little time sensitive. So if you would like to join us, we would very much be happy to do so, and very much happy to welcome you on board. But we would appreciate if you could get back to us by the end of this week, maybe, or indicate to either AWID or our other collaborator here is also could indicate to them how you'd like to join. And of course, that is time sensitive within the week or so. But then on the bigger picture, of course, leading up to the tribunal in September is also to inform and mobilize the duty bearers in your own context. When we say duty bearers, of course, we mean the state actors, government, whether it be local, national, etc., but also employers, human rights organizations, the national human rights institutions. The list goes on, right? So in different contexts, they vary. So to inform and mobilize them to pay attention to the tribunal, this is happening. Demands can be heard, problems can be heard, issues can be heard. So do attend in one way or another. And of course, publicizing it to the media to build pressure. So this works very well in national context, and we're trying to work out how it would also work out in more international contexts. So these are the ways that you can work with us leading up to the tribunal. And of course, during the tribunal, the biggest thing would be to mobilize the participation of your specific constituencies to watch and participate virtually. It is a virtual tribunal. Sorry if I didn't mention that earlier, but to watch us, to come online, to watch stories, to watch the testimonies, and to join GSWF. And as I mentioned earlier, we are organizing or looking to organize CSO-led discussions on the issues, as well as creative and artistic sessions. I do have a little star there because these are a work in progress of sorts. So we are still meeting within the tribunal's organizing committee to discuss whether would this be open calls or how would the coordination process of that work. So we hope to have more information soon. We're focusing on the testimony bulk and bit of things now, but we won't keep that information from you for too long. We hope to have it ready. But so basically, these are the various ways that you could participate and you could come on board the tribunal, and the more the merrier, of course. And we see the tribunal and GSWF as a connector across all movements and one built on different movements with the inclusion of different people and different voices. So to end it all from Shanti and I, these are the different ways you can get in touch with us. Our main email is gswf@ero-ap.org. I can put it in the chat after this, but yeah, get in touch with us and we would love to hear from you in whatever capacity that you'd like to join us. And thank you. Thank you so much, AWID, once again, for hosting this space for us to talk about the tribunal. And yes, that's all from my end. Back to you, Gopika.
Thank you, Shanti and Praveen. What I took away from that was, Shanti, you said what is different this time is the process, and really amazing to see this process panning out, how participatory and wide-reaching it is. So, and a lot of great opportunities to participate. Praveen, thank you for being so clear about all those different steps. And obviously, one of the critical things for the tribunal is testimonies. So we do invite everyone to, get in touch. Yeah, Praveen, if you could drop your details in the chat, that would also be great. And we'll reshare them as well with all of y'all. Now that we know a little bit about the tribunal itself, I'm going to go to our next speaker, Nasali, from the Uganda Horticultural, Industrial Service Providers and Allied Workers Union. And Nasali, I want to ask you, why is it important to hear the testimonies of women workers from Uganda and the African region more broadly? And why do you think it's important to build and support women workers' collective organizing? So we'd love to hear some of your thoughts, especially after having heard, both Shanti and Praveen speak more about the tribunal coming up. So Nasali, over to you. Nasali, if you are speaking, I think you're on mute. So I'm just, there we go.
Do you hear me now?
Yes, we hear you now, loud and clear.
Thank you. Greetings to you all. My name has already been mentioned, but I will say it again. My name is Nasali Jennifer, and I'm a General Secretary of Uganda Horticultural, Industrial Service Providers and Allied Workers Union, a trade union that organizes workers in the horticulture sector in Uganda. It is very important for us to be able to speak about these issues because, first of all, it awakens the minds of the people, because in most cases, we tend to see things from our perspective and from where we sit. We don't know that some people out there are living a completely opposite or different life altogether that is faced with a lot of challenges. So for me, I believe that the more we get to speak about these issues and the more we get different actors to know that certain things are happening differently out there, maybe it changes the way we see things and the way we do things for all of us. So that's why I believe that it's important to speak about these issues.
And is there anything you'd like to share from your experience working in Uganda about women workers there specifically, and maybe why you think it's important that their voices, what kind of issues are really important to them?
Yeah, I do have some issues to talk about, and I have summarized something here. Over the years, the horticulture sector, we have been having a number of challenges relating to unfair labor practices, and among others, it is low pay, which in some farms also has to do with delayed pay. Issues around occupational safety and health, including misuse of dangerous chemicals, sexual harassment in the farms, and issues around the social security. Yes, as of today, we cannot say that all these issues have been dealt with 100%, much as together with the Employers Association, from time to time, we negotiate better terms to better the working conditions. But still, we still have firms that deduct workers' national social security, and with a lot of impunity, does not remit to the fund. We also have firms that give workers personal protective equipments, which also in some cases are very poor quality, but only towards an inspection or an audit by the certification bodies, which are also highly manipulated. Those processes are highly manipulated. There is a firm as of today that has not paid its employees salaries for the last 5 months. Then you get to wonder how these people live and where the firm's priorities are. But amidst all these issues, today I specifically wanted to speak and draw the attention of the participants here and the tribunal on the low pay for the workers, specifically. Because living a decent life is a human right. But in order one to live a decent life, there are certain basic needs and standards that one must be able to access. It is not a secret that Uganda does not have or has an outdated national law on minimum wage, which was set in 1984. That was before I was born. 1984 at 6,000 Uganda shillings, which is $1.6 per month. That is our national law on minimum wage. With this and the very high unemployment rate, employers take advantage to pay workers as low as they wish. As low as they wish. With the absence of the minimum wage, with the very high unemployment rate, they know you refuse to be paid whatever is there we are offering you, another person will come and they will take up and will accept the same pay very, very comfortably. And then we have two sectors of flowers in Uganda. We have those that are growing roses, so they export the already grown flower, and those that are growing chrysanthemums. For the section that grows roses, they have not increased the salaries for workers since the year 2019. They have refused to negotiate with the union, claiming they're not making any profits and all that. They have also not increased the minimum pay since 2015, which is the minimum pay at that point, which is $24 per month. And we recognize the fact that for the section of the cuttings, they have made some efforts to improve the salaries for the workers, and the minimum pay was negotiated last year and increased to $55 per month. But considering the last study conducted by Fair Trade International, which estimates a living wage at $190, you see that there is also a very, very big gap. I know the question which I wanted us to ask each other is how do people survive? How do women survive amidst this? Most of the women in this sector are single mothers, young mothers. And this is the reason. Because of the low pay, the young women tend to engage into unwanted sexual relationships for financial gains. And in the end, one gets pregnant, the father is not there, and to make matters worse, this has also led to the spread of HIV. Okay. And there is a lot of ignoring of the issues, with our government saying they are not convinced that this country needs a minimum wage because it will draw away investors. Meaning that the hope is also very limited for us as a country to have a minimum wage. As a union, our hope is to negotiate towards a living wage. But our efforts are also made very, very limited with the absence of a minimum wage, because you don't have a starting point. Where do you start from to demand this living wage? That brings my point out the importance, why I felt interested to be part of this discussion and to the tribunal. Because when I read one of the intentions is influence power holders, the governments. I have seen where we speak about the ILO. My country is a member of ILO, and they attend the ILO meetings on an annual basis. And I remember one time in 2019, we had a lot of hope that we were getting maybe a minimum wage, because they were given a time frame within when a minimum wage was supposed to be put first in the country. But they went as far as creating a minimum wages board, which conducted a study. We had hope that it was going to result into a law, which did not come. In 2019, a member of parliament brought a private member's bill on the floor of parliament on a minimum wage. The parliament passed it. The president refused to assent to it. He's not yet convinced that the country needs a minimum wage. My question goes now to you and the members of the tribunal. What can we do jointly? How can you support us? Maybe the tribunal can have a voice to where our voices as workers right now cannot reach, that we have a minimum wage, and also maybe to advocate for a living wage. Personally, in the horticulture sector, I believe that one of the ways that we can achieve a living wage needs a lot of influence from the consumers, the buyers of the flowers, because the flowers we grow here are for export. I will stop there for now, unless if you have a specific question.
Thank you, Nasalid. I think you've really given us such a fantastic account of why this kind of tribunal is important. And I think many of the participants today will really relate to the issues that you have raised in their context. And I think there's no better time, since you really kind of emphasize the importance of wages, to pass over to our next speaker, Nandita. And we will have time for questions for everybody. So as soon as Nandita is done, we will open up for questions, clarifications. But before we do that, we do want to hear from Nandita Shivakumar of the Asia Flow Wage Alliance. So Nandita, welcome. We know that the Asia Flow Wage Alliance is one of the tribunal's collaborators, and you also have experience running other tribunals like the living wage tribunals in Asia. So what are some of the lessons that you've learned from the living wage tribunals that would be important to keep in mind for this one? And what do you think an explicitly feminist tribunal offers women workers and labor movements, especially in dealing with the impacts of the pandemic? So really looking forward to hearing some of your reflections. Nandita, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Gopika, for those questions. Really interesting questions. Just to give you a bit of context, AFWA, in collaboration with the People's Permanent Tribunal, we organized a series of national People's Tribunals on living wages for garment workers between 2011 and 14 in Cambodia, India, Indonesia, and Sri Lanka. And this was then followed with a dialogue with global union federations on the testimonies which were presented at the tribunal and the verdicts. And then we had a concluding tribunal where we presented on the pattern of labor violations emerging from the testimonies of Asian garment workers. The tribunals for us really helped in socializing and contextualizing the concept of living wages for women garment workers across Asia. And because I know we're short in time also, I will just say 3 major lessons we learned from the tribunals and what they offered us. Firstly, when we organized the National People's Tribunal, it was a tremendous opportunity for labor rights groups, women's groups, gender rights groups at local and national levels to come together and to work for the rights of women garment workers. So in countries where relationships between these groups was not very deep, the tribunal offered an opportunity to strengthen and deepen these relationships. And it later on paved the way for more collaborations between these groups. So, and I think that this tribunal also can play a very similar role, because in this pandemic period, there needs to be greater solidarity and closer engagement between various movements. And I do believe this tribunal is a good opportunity to bring all of these groups, particularly the women's and gender rights movement and the labor movement, closer and in deeper ways, so that we can advance the rights of women workers. Secondly, what I really like about tribunals is that it is a bottom-up initiative that provides a platform and a collective voice for working class women across Asia. So when we organized the tribunals, it helped bring a lot of public awareness in Asia itself about how the denial of a minimum living wage for women garment workers directly impacts the realization of human rights. It also generated this massive amount of evidence on how the conduct of fashion brands was dehumanizing women workers in Asia. So the tribunals played a massive role in building a bottom-up discourse, a narrative on the everyday violence that women workers are experiencing, how the non-payment of living wages influences this, and the role of global institutions. And it really laid a foundation. And today a lot more people are talking about living wage as a norm. And many of the subsequent wage campaigns that women's trade unions did, this really helped build the foundation for that. And I think, again, this tribunal also has a lot of potential on shaping what and how women's rights of working class women should be wherever they are, whatever they should be, in order to have a decent life, especially in this pandemic. And thirdly, I also believe tribunals can be a form of grassroots justice, and it is a very empowering process for women workers, many of whom's rights are not recognized and condemned to passive roles of victims. The national tribunals we organized were in local languages, and they were held physically. So women workers would come and give their testimonies in front of thousands of other workers, supporting them. And it gave a platform and a voice for these women, and it helped reaffirm their dignity through the recognition of the truth of their suffering. And I believe that tribunals can be really empowering for women, where women workers can assert their agency as dignified human beings rather than just mere factors of production. So in short, I think tribunals, from our experience, are powerful tools that can build greater solidarity between movements among women workers, create a bottom-up discourse on the rights of women workers, and the process of organizing the tribunal itself can be very empowering for organizations and the women participating in it. And just to answer your second question, Gopika, on why I think the tribunal is important to deal with the impacts of the pandemic. We all know that women workers have been disproportionately affected by the COVID-19 crisis. To give an example from the sector I come in, although women make up estimated 85% of garment workers on fashion supply chains, responses to COVID by fashion brands and retail platforms and even governments have failed to articulate even a gender responsive approach to addressing this crisis facing millions of women. So in garment factories, we've seen how COVID-19 has been used as an excuse to retrench women trade unionists as a form of union busting. Older women, pregnant women have been laid off, and women-headed households as well as households dependent on women's income have been put at increasing risk. And also, we've all heard so many cases of violence against women, particularly domestic violence, rising during the pandemic. And also, women's unpaid care work. It has also increased during the pandemic, and compounded with this lack of, employer provided social protection, many women are dropping out of paid employment. So however, despite these issues being broad and so deep and affecting so many millions of women, there is hardly a gender lens on workers' issues. And more broadly, there is a complete lack of perspective from both employers and governments in their responses to the pandemic, which is looking at it through a gender lens. And at best, whatever has happened has been very paternalistic also in nature. So in short, we are at a situation where there are, there's a deepening of gendered labor market, economic and health inequalities for women workers. And in this context, the tribunal can be a platform to voice the deep struggles that working class women have endured during the pandemic. It can show us the spectrum of gender-based violence that women have experienced, the link between factory, home, and community, and the perpetuation of violence against women, and how the economic violence that the pandemic has imposed on women has even impacted life outside the workplace. And I think it can set a direction on how we apply a critical gender lens towards humanitarian responses, also for improving women's employment, transforming the economy through structural change and redistribution. And it can really be a catalyst for building a new bottom-up movement by Asian women for women across the world. So I hope I've not taken too much time, Gopika.
Thank you. That was perfect. Very succinct, Nandita, not at all. And I think now we have a really healthy amount of time for question and answers. I think all of our speakers have really covered the range of, what's going to happen, when is it happening, and also hearing about the issues themselves, as well as why tribunals are important. So we have an open floor for questions. You could raise your hand. You could also, we're a small group, you could come off mute and speak your question or drop it in the chat. If you're not comfortable asking the question to everyone, you could also send me a message. I'd be happy to ask it to our speakers. I already see some comments, very interesting comments coming in through the chat. Priyanti has spoken about listening to testimonies and the importance of having buyers there as well. So we would probably need to strategize around this, an important point. So just opening up to questions, comments, reflections, specifically given the timeline of the tribunal. So just very curious to hear if anyone has any questions or clarifications for our speakers, or any reflections from yourselves. Oh, we have a question in the chat. Thank you, Shika, for kicking us off. The first question is, to what extent is the tribunal looking at accountability of corporations versus states? I wonder if Priyanti or Praveen, would you like to take that question from Shika?
I think my colleague Shanti might be best.
Sorry, I'm so sorry.
No worries. Priyanti is also our colleague, so we understand.
I know. I'm like sorry about that. Shanti, over to you. Thanks, Praveen.
That's fine. That's fine, Govika. No, I mean, the idea is like targeting both states as well as non-state. Definitely, corporations are like the targeted duty, like duty holders in this process. We are also like it actually depends on the testimonies that we are going to get. So once we have those testimonies, we will try to understand the actors who are responsible for that kind of situation, who are not addressing those violations. So we will come up with after we have understanding about the actors. Then the recommendations will be targeted to those actors. It doesn't matter whether they're state actors or non-state actors, whether they're individual employers, whether they're corporations, multinational corporations, private sector, at the national level. So yeah, definitely. I mean, just to answer that question very briefly, it will, the recommendations will be targeted to both state as well as corporate actors.
Thank you, Shanti. Any other questions, reflections? Inviting any reflections or comments as well. Anita, over. Would you like to come off mute and ask your question?
Yeah. Just a comment, actually. I feel such initiatives always generate a lot of energy and hope. And the problems which come are complex, and that is why they are not resolved as yet. There have been many actions, many actors, many stakeholders who have made a lot of effort, but still it's not sorted, and that's why it comes to a tribunal. So it would be good to map some backward and forward linkages of cases which are coming, and kind of clarify what can be expected, because sometimes there is a lot of effort from the ground, and in all commitment, it is not possible to respond. And then it kind of creates a lot of activity, but doesn't lead. So if we have certain strengths, like we are certainly very good with the horticulture supply chain, or links with the consumers, or with the garments, or with spinning, or any such, or mining, or anything, any particular strengths that can be mapped would help to focus energies better, because it is a very tough thing to speak about problems which are very painful, and then document it and go through it back and forth for everyone involved. So just a comment on how we could better focus energies in an effort that has so many hopes tied to it. Yeah.
Thanks, Anita. Could I also ask you to just quickly introduce yourself? So we get no worries. I should have asked that before. Yeah.
Yeah, I've put it in the chat, but basically I'm Anita, based in Bangalore. I work with a gender bias, largely with the gender bias. Have been consulting independently, but involved with the Norwegian Human Rights Fund on a thematic of women in work. So associated with work, labor issues to a large extent. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Anita. Do any of our speakers want to respond to that reflection? You don't have to, but just want to invite if anyone would like to share any thoughts. And if not, also others, please feel free to chime in. We do have a little bit of time left. Mamata, I see a hand raised.
Yes. Hi, Gopika.
It's a Mamata I recognize.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Mamata, and I work with Tradecraft Exchange. I'm speaking from Delhi in India. Apart from being in Tradecraft Exchange, I have been in the movement of gender rights and been part of the feminist circles for a long, long time. And I must thank all the colleagues, comrades in the call who have spoken so far. They are so deep and intense. And it actually took me back to some of the tribunals that I have either co-organized or have been part of. And I cannot agree more than, I cannot agree enough, that, tribunal is a powerful tool, and we must definitely explore and use it as a tool, as a political tool to highlight and demand justice. I just have a couple of thoughts that I thought I should share, definitely around the current political situation that many of the countries are across the globe are going through, where we are seeing very steep rise in authoritarianism, and there's a lot of silencing of voices and repression in the rise and all that. So I was thinking about when we are situating a tribunal of women workers, and we are expecting that, and as Anita was also saying, that these are disturbing, these are difficult, these are violations, and many of the speakers have also talked about it. How do we ensure that those voices are protected even after the tribunal, and those people are protected even after the tribunal? And I'm saying it with a, not necessarily on behalf of Tradecraft Exchange, but from my own personal experiences of, and I think this also links to what Anita was talking about, backward and forward linkages, because this is absolutely critical in the time that we are going through right now. And we don't want any of the voices or any of the demands to be silenced or to be not addressed. So that's one point. And the second is, and I'm happy to think it through together with all of us, because we may not have all the answers. I'm not looking for answers right now, but just wanted to bring this point here. And the other thing was more technical or logistical, maybe. It would be helpful to have more information about who are the, which are the organizations who are collaborating, because I do see that there's a number of organizations who are collaborating in organizing this tribunal and also this process of agenda setting. And the reason I'm asking this is also about, within Tradecraft Exchange, we are also looking at the possibility of engaging, just to inform everyone that Tradecraft Exchange works on the issues of workers' rights, and we are focusing on fashion industry, tea, and small-scale agriculture. And we have been working in Asia, particularly in India and Bangladesh. So we would like to explore the possibility of bringing some of the voices to the tribunal, if that is possible. So some of these information might be helpful. Thank you so much, and all power to everyone.
Thanks, Mamta. So good to see you. Sorry, I'm seeing Mamta after a very long time. Shanti, Praveen, would you like to share a bit about the partners? Maybe that would be, if you can give a sense of the partners, organizers, and also maybe Mamta, you could also connect directly. But I'll leave it to you, Shanti, Praveen, to respond to any of those thoughts.
All right. I'll go ahead and then my colleague Shanti can chip in. Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Shanti. So the first question is, Mamta, thank you so much for your question and for your thoughts and reflections. We're still we're still in the process where we're conceptualizing a lot of things. We're still having bilateral conversations, multilateral conversations with various constituencies and CSOs. So it's really helpful and really exciting to know that your organization would be interested in collaborating with us in whatever capacity that you would like to. So just for that, we invite you to get in touch with us via email. I'll just pop it in the chat again for everyone to see, and we'll be happy to get in touch and work together. So just for your two questions. So the first question was about, situating the tribunal in a very volatile, political landscape of silencing and repressing voices of activists, especially in work. So with that, one of the strategies that we're holding very close to us during the tribunal, and that we are looking to develop leading up to the tribunal as well, is a sort of risk management strategy of sorts, because the fear of reprisal is very valid, it's very real, and the possibilities of reprisal in whatever manifestations it may come has to be something that we pay attention to, because we just don't want to take the stories and testimonies of witnesses without ensuring them that this is a safe space for them to come and share it. So as I mentioned, we are in the process of developing that strategy. We hope to engage both of these manifestations in the physical realm as well as the online realm, mainly because it's also a virtual tribunal. So my answer is that we are working on it. We hope to have a more concrete idea of that very, very soon. As we are, onboarding or crowdsourcing witnesses and informing them of the possible risks, as well as how we plan to mitigate those risks. And we'll be excited as well to follow up with you to see how we can work through that together. That will be really exciting. And as for the organizing, I hope I answered that question enough. Perfect. As for the organizations who are on board with us as of now, we have a list of about 20 organizations or so, which I think will be a little bit long for me to read through everything. But just as a brief distribution sort of thing is that we're engaging organizations on all international, regional, and national levels. We have been working between the distinction of a geographical focus as well as sector focus. So we are also try to tick both boxes with organizations who are coming on board with us. We hope to have enough representations geographically. We also hope to have enough representations across sectors. So I think maybe once you get in touch, it'll be easier for us to introduce you to the coalition that we have of sorts that we're pulling together, as well as the organizing committee that we are building. So I hope that didn't take up too much time. Thank you so much for your questions so far.
Thank you, Praveen, so much. I'll get in touch with all of you. Thank you.
So we still have we have a few minutes left. There is a question about the process and date of the tribunals. May has asked this question. May, we'll give you a reminder of the dates, but I think Praveen as well had shared a little bit about the process. Maybe I will ask Praveen to remind us all of that before we get off the call, just so it's very fresh for those of us who've joined late, just to give us the dates of the tribunal and especially the timeline for the testimonies. There's also a comment in the chat about the garment workers, supply chain, women workers, and how but how can we go forward to resolve all the grievances in a global tribunal? That is Saroja from GLUE, the Garment Labor Union in Bangalore. So yeah, we have those two kind of final sort of reflections and comments. So maybe I will hand over to the ERA team to reflect on how we move forward from the tribunal, and then maybe also finishing off with a reminder of the dates and sort of the immediate process. And Shanti, I see your hand up already, so maybe I'll hand over to you for that.
Thanks, Gopika, and thanks for all those questions. I was just trying to write them down. One thing there was earlier, I think, raised by Mamata about the agenda setting process. So it was like once we decided that we organize this tribunal, we thought, because it is a global tribunal and it's open to all sectors. That's why we thought we will need something to guide us. So thematic priorities are there. So we have 5 thematic areas, and those thematic areas are quite broad. They can accommodate lots of things in one area. So the process to come up with that decision, we did that through survey. So we sent out survey to like organizations and groups that we were connected to, and we tried to call it, come to the decision on how those, what are those priority areas. So that was just about the agenda. The process and all other things, we will share information with you. So we have put together some information that can be shared. The dates, definitely, like it's 24th to 28th September. And on 9th October, after 1 week of the tribunal, there will be a day for recommendation, delivering recommendation. So the process this time, we haven't explained much about the process. We are going to have a jury. We are going to have thematic jury working groups who will be the key, which will be the kind of key structure to analyze, to take, to facilitate the tribunal forward. So we will share all that through emails, and we can further talk about that. I was just wondering about one, the reflection that was raised earlier by Anita about like mapping the strength, because that is where we are also struggling, because this is first time we are organizing something this big. We are counting on counting on everyone's support and suggestions and ideas, right? And good thing is we have Praveen on board, who was part of the Women's Tribunal in Malaysia. And we have organizations like Asia Floorways Alliance on board. So with the experience, CWGL with the experience of organizing tribunals. So we are counting on those. One part is we are still kind of struggling and figuring out the accountability part of the whole thing. And once we come up with the list of recommendations, how we are going to take that forward. It's not just that 9th October, but how is it going to be part of our everyday advocacy? And that mapping the strength, I think is I really like that idea, because it gets frustrating after a certain time. Like we organize something this big, and how many out of those like long list of recommendations that we are going to achieve, right? So in that, I think we have to keep on counting the strength and the success stories, and to learn from there, having very specific advocacy and accountability strategy to push the outcome of this process. So I think that is something for us to think about when we develop the accountability strategy. Did I miss out anything? There was a question about immediate process. I think the immediate process, as Praveen said, is the deadline to compile the testimonies. That is the most important one because it is time sensitive. We have to give people enough time to tell their stories. We have to give judges and the jury working group enough time to analyze those. That's why the immediate thing about the process is like, let us know if you are interested to be part of it. We are in the process of translating the witness documents in different languages based on the need, because we don't know until we, you tell us what is your language need, and then we will, and then be part of the process. You can start collecting testimonies, send us testimonies from your constituency. That is the immediate action we want you to take if you are interested to engage.
Thank you so much, Shanti. That's a great note to wrap up on. And I think Priyanti has said something quite important in the chat, which is not sure that we can resolve all grievances in any sector, but that is where the backward and forward linkages come into play. So really important that everyone participating are able to bring stakeholders to the tribunal and use the tribunal as a means of your own advocacy. So I think that's a great note to end on. And thank you so much, everybody, for joining. We really encourage everyone here who's interested in the process to email the ERA Asia Pacific team, fairly soon, especially if you are interested in sharing testimonies and bringing your constituencies and their experiences to the tribunal in September. We're out of time, but I just want to say thank you again to Praveen, to Shanti, to Nandita, to Nasali for sharing your experiences. And we really send you a lot of solidarity, and we'll continue to support this process as we move towards September. So very excited to have hosted this discussion, and we hope that we get more and more stories, as well as we hope that this process really leads to a space of solidarity, of sharing. We certainly need it in the context of this pandemic. So I think it's really amazing to see it come to life. So thank you, everybody, again. Thank you to our speakers, and thanks to everyone who's come and and engaged deeply on this issue. And we really hope that we hope that this process will really be successful, and that all of us have an opportunity to share and co-create together. So thanks again. I hope you have a lovely day, afternoon, evening, and see you soon. Bye.
Thank you.